I call the member for Gippsland.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And it's not with any triumph that I rise today to speak in relation to this matter of public importance. I take no satisfaction from the topic before us, and it's the Rudd government's failure to properly manage the building the education revolution. I'm not going to indulge in a debate on the merits of the program as the amount of borrowed money of $14.7 billion the government has set aside for the initiative, because that debate has been had. But, Deputy Speaker, the government has an obligation to the Australian public to achieve value for money, to roll out this initiative to achieve its stated objectives, and I fear there are many examples of the government's failure to properly manage the program, particularly in regional areas. It's typical of this government that any concerns which are raised by the opposition members are typecast, and I quote from the Minister's answer in question time yesterday as carping, moaning and criticism. And it's not carping, moaning and criticism, Deputy Speaker, it's pointing out some faults in the program and the Minister's need to intervene before the state governments waste millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. Billions even. Thank you, Member for Sturt. It's called being accountable, and being accountable to the Parliament and being accountable to the Australian taxpayers who'll be paying off the Rudd government debt for decades to come. And I like to think that I'm a reasonable person, but behind all the rhetoric we've heard today from the Minister, she must understand by now there is a problem, and it relates to this value for money issue and the indecent haste with which this program is being implemented. To understand my concerns and the concerns of Gippsland builders and principals and teachers who have contacted my office, you need to consider the government's stated objectives for this program. And the Minister has never been one to hide her lighter under a bushel, and I quote yesterday from her media release announcing round 2 of the primary schools program, and I quote, "The Rudd government is unashamedly undertaking the largest school modernisation in Australia's history to support local jobs, stimulate every local economy and invest in important long-term infrastructure." And again yesterday in the chamber, the Minister said, in particular, the Building the Education Revolution guidelines have required that wherever it's possible, local tradespeople are engaged for the work. Well, here's a newsflash for the Minister. It's not quite working like that in Gippsland. The money is being shovelled out the door in such indecent haste that many schools are not getting the chance to secure the infrastructure that they want. Local builders are being excluded from tendering for the work, and there are fears that many of my smaller schools will only receive a relocatable building. In many instances, Deputy Speaker, it's the portable education revolution, not exactly long-term infrastructure. There's not many jobs in regional areas from bolting a few portables together after they've been delivered on the back of the truck from the city. And to be fair to the Minister, I know she doesn't trust the opposition, she doesn't believe the case studies that we've put forward, and she certainly wouldn't have been receiving any reports from her own backbench. They're too scared to speak out themselves. And, Deputy Speaker, what are the chances? What are the chances of any regional MP in the Labor Party actually standing up for jobs in their electorate? It's just like we had the debate over the CPRS. They come in here like sheep and they bleat the party lines on other issues, but when it comes to these critical issues of jobs in regional communities, it's the silence of the lambs. We don't hear a peep out of them. And what are the chances of the regional MPs like the member for Dawson or the member for Flynn, member for Leichhardt or the member for Page actually standing up for jobs in regional areas? And what are the chances of that? It's hard to say. So rather than rely on our own backbench or take the word from opposition MPs, may I refer the Minister to the Bensdale Advertiser and the editorial comments in Monday's edition. And under the headline "Bureaucratic Nonsense," let's see what the editor of this fine journal in the electorate of Gippsland had to say. And I quote, "The education building process, already criticised on other grounds by school principals, is bureaucratic nonsense. With one hand, government set out to provide schools that will equip students for their future employment needs. With the other hand, they handicap local firms that can build the required facilities and at the same time provide much-needed jobs for local school leavers. Governments are stifling local initiatives, discouraging local youth and making a mockery of their claim to govern for all people." And what is it that has so riled the editor of the Bensdale Advertiser? Well, in one instance, it's the government's outrageous betrayal of regional students on their gap year, but we'll leave that topic for another day. But it's also the issue that frustrating the editor of the Bensdale Advertiser is the same issue that had local builders speaking out in the press. They're being prevented from even tendering for projects in their local area. The very program that's meant to be creating local jobs is not even completely open to the local building industry. I've spoken previously on the issue, but given the lack of response from the Minister's office, I will repeat the scenario for the Minister's benefit. There are well-respected building firms in Bensdale which have successfully completed a range of significant public building works in the past for the Education Department and other government agencies. Not surprisingly, these firms were offered the opportunity to tender for 3 projects in Gippsland under Stage 1 of the primary schools program. The only problem is, Deputy Speaker, the 3 projects were located in Foster, San Remo and Wonthaggi. These towns are not even in the Gippsland electorate and are about 2 to 3 hours drive away from these Bensdale-based firms. Now, meanwhile, there is a multi-million-dollar contract in Bensdale that the same firms have been excluded from tendering from as part of this Stage 1 process. I just asked the House Deputy Speaker what genius in Melbourne in the Education Department came up with this plan, and why won't the Minister actually intervene to ensure that local traders have the opportunity to tender for every local project? Most people have been reluctant to speak publicly about these decisions for fear of the reprisals, and that they don't wish to have a black mark put against their company name. They don't want to sound churlish or ungrateful for the investment of taxpayers' money, but they do want to achieve the best value for money and the best possible project for their school communities. I can assure the House, though, that I've been contacted by several local builders and at least 10 school principals who have all expressed concerns with the way this program is being managed. And I do accept, Deputy Speaker, it is a huge program and it's being rolled out right across Australia. But that is no excuse for cutting corners and abrogating our responsibility to achieve value for money. I think the state government, particularly in Victoria, is leading the Minister up the garden path in relation to this whole project. There are a couple of builders who have spoken out in the media in my electorate. Michelle Brooker and Chris Banks both told the Bairnsdale Advertiser that they'd been asked to tender for these jobs which are 3 hours away while missing out on the local work which they could service about 3 minutes away. And also Warren Robinson of Dynamic Windows told the local press, "We've been denied access to participate. For instance, if a portable classroom is established at a local school, it's manufactured in Melbourne. Our industry is in crisis and the stimulus package will not help our local businesses at all." Deputy Speaker, I said at the outset it's not with any great sense of triumph that I raise these concerns. My primary interest is to make sure that the taxpayers of Gippsland and across Australia receive value for money under this program, and my local schools get to build the best possible facilities with the funding that has been allocated to them. There are people in my electorate who will be paying off this debt, of course, for many years to come, and they should expect maximum value in terms of local jobs supported and the quality of the facilities that are actually built. Unfortunately, in too many cases, that is not what's occurring in Gippsland. I know of building firms in Sale and Latrobe Valley which have been offered tenders in Orbost and Goongerah, which are 3 to 4 hours away. But the state government's program managers have indicated they won't even be asked to tender for schools which are literally around the corner. I'm worried about the round 2 programs which have been announced this week, whether Gippsland and Latrobe Valley building firms will even have the opportunity to tender for more than $20 million worth of work. It defies logic and it's completely contradictory to the Minister's comments that local jobs would be supported in every region in Australia. Finally, the member for Dawson has found his voice, a voice you can't find on behalf of regional jobs on any other occasion.
The member for Dawson
but because of this
does
ridiculous
not have
haste,
the call.
major mistakes have been made at every step of the process, and I appeal to the Minister to take the time to actually get it right. The tendering is being compressed into ridiculously short timeframes, and builders are telling me that the template designs are being changed with program managers unsure about what building is actually being offered to each school, even within a week of when the tenders were due to close. As a result, builders are inflating their prices to cover contingencies and also inflating their prices to meet the travel and accommodation costs of moving workers across the region. There seems to be a complete lack of understanding within the Victorian State Government about the impact of the rollout of this program or the capacity of the local community to handle all of the work at the same time. We need to be considering the regional implications of this program and whether the regional building industry can actually cope with the amount of work that is being shovelled out the door. Once you get an out-of-town firm coming into a smaller regional market to complete these jobs, there is a complete distortion of the local market. You'll end up with workers being taken from existing firms, it will destabilise the local workforce and the profits will head straight out of town. This system that is being employed of packaging projects and offering them for tenders is convenient for the government and may suit these ridiculous timeframes, but it won't deliver value for money or support local jobs. As much as there's an issue with the tender process, the value for money and the capacity of local builders to secure the work, there's also an issue with the facilities that are actually being offered. I've mentioned already the concerns expressed to me by several smaller schools that there will be no local jobs created if all they receive is a portable building on the back of a truck. This is one of the most galling aspects of the program. It reflects the complete lack of understanding on the other side of the House of how our small communities actually work. If this money was actually made available to the school councils themselves, they would use it to leverage off other fundraising activities and secure local traders who are sympathetic to the school's needs. Our country communities have a great capacity to stretch a dollar further, and I'm certain that we'd end up with better quality projects and more value for money if the small schools in particular had the chance to set local priorities. Trust the local school councils to deliver local solutions to their own problems would be a far better approach than that being undertaken by the government. Other schools in my electorate which are entitled to much larger sums of money, up to $2 and $3 million, are being pressured to accept template designs which don't meet their needs. As I've previously told the House, when the Prime Minister talks about shovel-ready, it means shovel the money out the door and cross your fingers that some of the projects actually hit the mark. There should be a more strategic approach to this program, and local communities should have more control. I urge the Minister to take the time to get it right.
The member's time has expired.